All right, let's dive into this whole AI thing, especially with all this buzz around Meta's LLaMA 3.1.
Yeah, it's everywhere right now.
We're digging into issue hashtag 72 of the Synthetic Work newsletter. They break down what LLaMA means for, well, everyone, really.
It's a dense one, that's for sure. Packed with technical details and some pretty big questions about where AI is headed.
Right. Like, imagine if these super powerful AI tools weren't locked up in some tech company's vault, but anyone could use them. That's the promise of LLaMA 3.1, and people are freaking out, understandably.
It's a potential game changer, no doubt. But we've got to be realistic. Any tool this powerful comes with its own set of risks and challenges.
Which is exactly why we're here to unpack it all. This newsletter issue goes deep on the tech stuff, but let's start big picture. Is LLaMA 3.1 really as revolutionary as everyone's saying? Like, is it on par with GPT-4?
That's the million-dollar question. And this is where it gets interesting. The newsletter points out a huge problem in the AI world right now. Benchmarks.
Benchmarks, like how they measure how good these AI models are.
Exactly. It turns out a lot of the benchmarks they use to compare large language models, they're flawed.
Hold on, so we can't trust the numbers we're seeing.
Not entirely.
Mm-hmm.
Some benchmarks are better than others, but there's no single perfect way to measure these things. That's why it's important to look at a variety of sources, not just rely on one set of numbers, like the newsletter mentions these alternative charts from ARK Invest. They give a different perspective on LLaMA's strengths. It's kind of like trying to figure out the best athlete.
Oh, I see what you mean. Like, are we talking pure speed, strength, strategy? It's not always a simple comparison.
Yeah.
Okay, so if these benchmarks aren't reliable, how do we assess something like LMA 3.1? What are we supposed to look at?
That is the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
One approach is to focus on real-world applications instead of just test scores. For example, the newsletter talks about LLaMA's potential for handling massive amounts of text. And I mean massive. It's got this 128,000 token context window. Basically, you could feed it an entire novella, and it's supposed to just, like, get it.
Wow, that's a lot of data. But can it actually make sense of that much information? Or is that just a fancy spec on paper?
That's the key, right?
Hmm.
Can it not only process, but truly understand and reason with that much data? That's what will determine if it's actually useful for things like analyzing huge documents, really high-level translation, or those super smart AI assistants everyone keeps talking about.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense because anyone can have a ton of data thrown at them, but it's how you use it that matters.
Exactly. Think about it. Instead of just spitting out a summary of a document, imagine an AI that can grasp the nuances, pull out the key arguments, maybe even identify hidden biases.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it like that.
It is, and it makes you wonder, at what point does more data stop being helpful and just become overwhelming, even for a crazy powerful AI?
Right. Like, there's got to be a limit somewhere. Too much of a good thing, maybe?
Maybe. It's like giving someone a library card but no clue how to actually find the books they need. A big context window is impressive, sure, but it's the AI's ability to actually use that information effectively that matters.
And speaking of strategy, let's talk about Meta's angle here. This part really jumped out at me in the newsletter. Why is Meta being so open with Llama? It's like they're giving away their secret sauce. What's the game plan?
It is a bit of a head-scratcher at first glance, right?
Yeah.
Why give away something so potentially valuable? Well, the newsletter suggests a few possibilities.
Okay, I'm listening. Lay it on me.
One idea is that Meta's playing the long game. They're not just releasing Llama into the wild, they're being strategic about it. They're partnering with big AI providers and platforms from day one.
So it's less about making money from Llama directly and more about making it the industry standard.
You got it. Kind of like what Google did with Android, which the newsletter actually points out.
The Android of AI, that's a good way to put it.
Right. Make it accessible, relatively easy to integrate, and suddenly developers are incentivized to build on top of Llama. That creates a whole ecosystem of apps and services.
Yeah.
And that's where the real value is being the foundation for everything else.
It's a classic power play. Dominate the market by becoming indispensable. But the newsletter also brings up another possible motive, and it's a little more strategic, let's say.
You mean the idea of Llama being a bit of a loss leader?
That's the one. Is Meta giving away the AI to get something even more valuable in return? Mountains and mountains of user data.
Ah, yes. The lifeblood of the modern tech giant. It's no secret that Meta loves data,
To put it mildly.
right? And the newsletter even points out how they're already using their platforms, like Facebook and Instagram, for something called reinforcement learning from human feedback, or RLHF.
RLHF. Okay, break that down for me. What is that and why should I care?
So in a nutshell, RLHF is like sending your AI to charm school. Every time you like a post, comment on a photo, even just how long you linger on something, you're subtly teaching Meta's algorithms about your preferences, what you like, what you don't. All of that is incredibly valuable for fine-tuning something like Llama.
So you're saying it's like training a dog with treats, but instead of treats, it's our attention and data.
That's a great way to put it. And all that data, it's gold. It's how they make Llama more accurate, more engaging, more aligned with what people actually want.
Mm.
But it also brings up some big questions about data privacy.
For sure. Like, how much are our online actions being used to shape these AI systems without us even realizing it? It's kind of creepy if you think about it too much.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that leads us to the big question that I'm sure is on everyone's mind. What happens when AI starts automating away jobs? And we're not just talking factory work here.
Yeah, this isn't some sci-fi movie. This is real life.
Right. And this newsletter connects Llama's release to a study on universal basic income, or UBI, which I found fascinating.
UBI, like just giving everyone a regular income, no strings attached. I've heard of that. But how does it tie into AI?
Well, the idea is if AI takes over a ton of jobs, how do we ensure people are still able to support themselves? This open research study, and it's worth noting that it was funded in part by Sam Altman, the founder of OpenAI.
Whoa, the guy who's leading the charge on AI development is also funding research into its potential downsides.
Interesting. Right. It makes you think. But anyway, this study's findings are pretty surprising. It turns out that giving people a regular cash stipend, no strings attached, actually led to some positive outcomes.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. What kind of positive outcomes? Spill the tea.
So you might think people would just sit around doing nothing, right? But the study found that people were actually more likely to look for jobs when they had that safety net. They were just more selective.
So it's like having that financial cushion gave them the freedom to be pickier and find work that was a better fit.
Exactly. Like they weren't just desperate for any job to survive. And here's the other thing. People also spent more time on leisure activities, which, isn't necessarily a bad thing.
So maybe AI taking over some jobs isn't inherently bad. It could actually push us towards more fulfilling work and more downtime.
It's a possibility. But it also brings up another question. Will people still feel the need to seek out meaningful work if they're not financially obligated to?
It's the age-old question. Are humans driven by purpose or by pleasure? Or by some combination of both?
Exactly. And there's no easy answer. But this study suggests that even with a safety net, people still crave a sense of accomplishment, of purpose. It's like this fundamental human need.
It's almost like that drive to create and contribute is hardwired into us.
Maybe so.
It's almost like that drive to create and contribute is hardwired into us.
Maybe so. And speaking of creation, the newsletter takes us down a completely different path, something that feels straight out of a sci-fi movie. Jailbreaking AI. Okay, now that's a term you don't hear every day. What's that all about? So remember how we talked about LLaMA being this really powerful tool? Well, the newsletter actually includes examples of these, like jailbreak prompts, basically bits of code that can bypass the safety restrictions built into LLaMA.
Wait, really? Like hacking into the Matrix or something?
Kind of, and it brings up this really interesting ethical dilemma.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Go on.
On the one hand, you've got the people who created these AI models, and they want to make sure they're used responsibly, right? Like, we don't want some rogue AI deciding to write a screenplay about a robot uprising and then, trying to make it happen.
Right. Bad things happen when AI goes rogue. Nobody wants that.
Exactly. But on the other hand, there's this question of control and censorship. Who gets to decide what's safe and what's dangerous when it comes to AI? And what happens when those safety measures actually prevent people from using the technology for, legitimate purposes?
It's like those child-proof locks on everything, right? They're there for a reason, but man, they're annoying if you actually know how to use the thing safely.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And with AI, the line between safe and unsafe isn't always so clear.
It seems like it would get pretty fuzzy, yeah.
Totally. And the newsletter makes the point that a lot of this jailbreaking stuff, it's not coming from a malicious place. It's more about users wanting to explore the full potential of the AI, push its boundaries, maybe even find flaws that the creators didn't catch.
So kind of like those ethical hackers who find vulnerabilities in systems so they can be fixed before someone with bad intentions finds them.
Exactly. It's about pointing out weaknesses so they can be strengthened.
But that makes sense. So it sounds like what we really need is a better way for AI developers and users to communicate, to have a back and forth about how to balance safety with innovation.
100%.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe some of the most groundbreaking AI applications will come from the people who aren't afraid to, poke around under the hood a little bit.
I like that. Poke around under the hood. It's like giving people the keys to the car and trusting them to drive responsibly. Sure, there's some risk involved, but it could also lead to some amazing road trips.
Right. And speaking of real-world consequences, the newsletter ends on a slightly more serious note, talking about how video game voice actors are now on strike because of AI.
Oh, yeah, I saw something about that. That's a tough one. It really makes you think if AI can replace voice actors, what jobs are next?
It's the question everyone's asking, right?
Right.
It's already happening in creative fields like writing, music, art.
Hmm.
It's easy to feel like our jobs are on the line.
And it's not just those industries either. It feels like AI is seeking into everything.
It is. And it's understandable to be concerned. But I think it's less about humans versus AI and more about how we adapt and evolve alongside this technology. Like what skills can we develop that complement AI rather than trying to compete with it?
So instead of trying to outcode the machines, focus on what makes us human.
Exactly. Things like critical thinking, creativity, emotional intelligence, those uniquely human skills that are much harder to replicate with AI.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a lot to wrap your head around. Like, on one hand, we have this incredibly powerful AI that's becoming more and more accessible.
Right.
But then on the other hand, we're still grappling with these huge questions about jobs, about ethics, about what it even means to be human in an age where AI can do so much.
Hmm.
It's exciting, sure, but also kind of unsettling.
It is a weird mix of emotions, right?
Yeah,
But I think the important thing to remember is that we're not just along for the ride here. This isn't some predetermined future where AI just takes over. We have a say in this.
we do.
Absolutely. We have the power to shape how this technology develops. It starts with education, with open and honest conversations about both the potential benefits and the risks.
So, what can we do? Like, how do we make sure AI is used for good, that everyone benefits? Where do we even start?
The big question, and there's no easy answer, but I think it starts with understanding. The more we know about AI, how it works, what it's capable of, the better equipped we'll be to make informed decisions, both as individuals and as a society. We need to be having these conversations across disciplines, across industries, across, well, everything really.
It can't just be left up to the tech people, right?
Right, because ultimately this technology will impact all of us. And it's up to us to figure out how we want to integrate it into our lives, into our work, into our world.
It's about finding that balance, right, between innovation and responsibility.
Exactly.
Right.
We can't just blindly embrace every new technology without considering the potential consequences. We have to be willing to ask tough questions, to challenge assumptions, to make sure AI is aligned with our values.
To make sure it's serving humanity, not the other way around.
100%. That's what
Yeah.
it all comes down to. And I think these conversations are already starting to happen, which is encouraging.
Yeah, it definitely feels like AI is becoming a bigger part of the conversation everywhere you look. And I have to say, this deep dive has been really eye-opening. I feel like I have a much better grasp on not just Llama itself, but also this whole landscape of AI development and how it's all connected.
That's great to hear. I always say knowledge is power. The more we understand, the better decisions we can make.
Well said. So, where do we go from here? What's the next step?
That's the question, isn't it? And it's one we'll all have to answer together. But if there's one thing I hope our listeners take away from this deep dive, it's that the future of AI is not predetermined. It's something we're actively shaping through the choices we make every day.
It's a call to action, really, to stay informed, stay engaged, and to help steer this technology in a direction that benefits all of humanity. This has been an amazing conversation, and I'm sure it's one we'll be continuing for a long time to come. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of LLaMA and the future of AI.